Hey, you're listening to the Intentional Documentary Podcast. So glad to have you. Around here, I'm gushing over the stories behind the pictures that we freaking love of our own lives. You know, the ones we hold as high value and iconic, because this is where photography meets real life. I'm your host, Marie Moss, and I believe that the best way to approach your photography is through your lens, your way. Through insightful conversations with photographers, I'll explore preserving life with your camera and using what lights you up to grow your brand. Let's get started. All right, today's guest is Seshu, who is a photographer from Connecticut, and he's also the founder of Tiffin Box, which is a wonderful resource site for photographers. And I've got to tell you, what his site reminds me of is StumbleUpon. Have you heard of that? StumbleUpon.com. My sister introduced it to me, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years ago. And you put in your interests, and then all you do is you hit the stumble button, and it will randomly select a web page based on all of your interests that it thinks that you're going to like. And I can assure you that very quickly you will be sucked into this rabbit hole of all kinds of really cool things that you probably never would have thought to look for. And Tiffin Box kind of reminds me of that for photographers. You don't have to put in your interests or anything like that, but what Seshu has been doing is just going out there and collecting some of the best nuggets that have stuck with him and bookmarking it for all of us to enjoy and experience. StumbleUpon's tagline is "Discover the best of the web, one click at a time." And that's exactly what his site reminds me of for photographers. He even says later in our conversation how it started as a selfish act of just bookmarking the stuff that he wanted to remember. And then he introduced it as a website to help it inspire other people like us, like you and me. Seshu and I met in real life last year when he invited me to speak at the 2017 Connecticut PPA annual convention on the topic of intentional documentary, which was an awesome, energizing experience for myself. What I think I love most about Seshu is his naturally curious mind. He must be one of the most well-connected people that I know. It seems like he knows just, like, I don't know, it feels like he knows everybody in the photography community. And it's not about who he knows or how many people he knows. To me, it's just a true testament to the fact that he's always learning. He's excited about learning. He is very open to other people's points of view. He's a listener. He listens before he makes an opinion and judges. You know what I mean? Like I think some of us are so stuck in our own little world that we don't branch out from that. So there's a lot to learn from just how he learns. And I wanted to bring him on to pick his brain on the Seshu inside of his work. I wanted to talk to him about just how he shows up as a photographer himself. So we talked about his journey and what he got out of formal education, which is something that I've always wondered if I've missed out on something because I didn't have that background. Through several stories, we talk about his voice and how his pictures weave a relative mix of being loved, being important, and being present. And then we get into talking about his parents, both through pictures and also their influence on his work, with a beautiful 2-part lesson that they gave him that stuck with him. And honestly, I think it's something that we can all learn from. And then, as always, we wrap up with his iconic photo submission, which, of course, I think you need to grab the mini mag if you've got a couple seconds. Hit the pause button if you need to. Go to fearlessandframed.com/intentional documentary podcast and look for this episode, or text the number 44222 with the code 017TREAT, and I'll email you over the mini mag so you can follow along. But enough about all of that. Enjoy the story. Seshu, thank you so much for coming on with me. How you doing over there?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me. Really, it's such an honor.
All right, so I know about you. I have met you. I've told everybody in the sub intro about you, but can you, in your words, give us the story of your photography journey so far, from like when you picked up the camera till now, the short version?
The short version, okay, very, very quickly. So I was going to study Japanese history, and I was going to have to learn Japanese in Japan, and which is what took me to Japan in the late '90s. And when I was there, one of the things that happened, of course, was that there was considerable amount of downtime sometimes, and instead of going to the bars and or you know drinking or whatever, I would walk the streets and just sort of look at the culture of Tokyo. And one of my friends who was in the camera club, and camera clubs and clubs in general in Japanese universities are a big deal. So being a part of a camera club is a big deal. And he invited me in, and he said, "Hey, let's get you busy." And he showed me how to use a camera. He showed me how to use the film, how to process it, and print it. And it was all very exciting. And of course, I took what I've learned from him out into the streets and just sort of introduced myself to people and started making photographs on the street. And sometimes I'd go inside places where people were playing, their typical sports or whatever it is, and just introduce myself and say, "Hey, in my broken Japanese, like, I would love to be able to just observe and then photograph if it's okay with you." And most of the time it was okay, and they didn't care. And so that's where I got my start. I was, a black and white photographer, and by the end of the 2 years I was there, I realized that I wanted to do this full time, but I didn't have the foundation still. I felt sort of like, I didn't know quite what I wanted to do. So I applied to be a student at Indiana University in the graduate studies program in photojournalism. So that's where I got my start, really, into photography, into photojournalism, working for newspapers, magazines, things like that, and then eventually find myself in the East Coast where I live now.
Yeah, I really love that you have such an extensive background, and even like in your work today, it shows you have a really well-rounded body of work that you've shown, at least here what I'm seeing in your Dropbox and what I see on your Instagram, because what I see quite often with the people in my community that I work with, it's mostly photographers that I really relate to that are in their late 20s, early 30s. They've got kids who are under 7 years old. And I just see a lot of little kids in home, which is nothing wrong with that. But what I see with your work, it's like you've got such a wide variety. I'm assuming, are these your in-laws or your?
Those are my parents.
Those are your parents. Okay.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I was thinking your parents were over in India, and this looks like
they were visiting us actually when I photographed them. Yeah.
And so anyway, like you've got different generations here, different environments, and I think that just really speaks to your background compared to a lot of the people who are listening who are photographing just their own families and then clients who are kind of similar. I would love to know, what do you think that you've gained out of, I mean, I know there's so much really, but what have you gained out of going to school for photojournalism and working in the newspapers, and like your journey? What do you think are some nuggets that you have gained from that we're missing out on? Like somebody like me, I picked up the camera when my kids were born. I didn't have that formal education. I didn't have that experience in working with newspapers and stuff like that. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, sure. I think personally, I'm a terribly undisciplined person. And my wife will attest to that. She's like, "Wow, why can't you just focus on this and get it done?" And I think going to school at Indiana and then eventually at Ohio University as well, and being surrounded by people who are incredibly creative, and not just creative, but they're very disciplined. There's a certain amount of discipline that's required in being able to produce work. And I think we forget that a lot of the times. And I have to be reminded of that a lot. So I think that's what I would sort of go to right away and say that, yes, there's a certain structure, certain, obviously program to follow. But my teachers were very good about, sort of bringing back that focus to me and helping me sort of figure out, okay, we need to get this work done. So let's see what that entails, being able to either find people to photograph or, just deliver the photography to my professors to have them critique it. All of that sort of takes incredible amount of focus, and I think that's where I thank them, because being able to do that day in and day out, I now have a system when I photograph families. I don't wait 3 days to process their pictures. I do it right away.
Mm.
It's just a part of my habit. It's a sort of a habit, Like my wife would say, "Oh, it's 10 o'clock at night. What are you doing?" In my basement home studio. So, well, I got to download my files. I mean, it's just part of the thing I got to do. And I immediately go to Photo Mechanic and I start culling, and then I move the files that I feel like are bill files to show my clients into the selects folder, and that's where I stop. Then I go up and go to bed. But I want to make sure that process is done. And until that process is done, I can't sleep, and I'm almost tossing and turning all over the place. So that's what I credit my professors at school for doing, is being able to say, to bring this sort of focus and discipline to the way I work.
Yeah, I really like that. I never really thought of it from that angle. I think often when I think of going to school for photography in whatever kind of, whether it's fine art, photojournalism, whatever, I picture sitting in the classroom, looking at pictures from the masters, and then going out there and doing some sort of a project in the field. But I didn't really.
There was that too. Yeah.
I didn't really think of just the consistency to constantly be challenged. That is really kind of cool, because we're over here, I think, like people who didn't have that kind of an education, it's kind of like I'm a rogue photographer over here, where I get a little bit of education if I join a workshop, but other than that, it's just out here doing. And I love that perspective of just being in that environment for growth.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's probably been said before, having a second or a third set of eyes on a body of work, and to have people critique it in a way that's constructive, obviously, but brutal at the same time. They were not, they were not going to sugarcoat anything.
Yeah.
That is incredible. I mean, we've gotten into the habit of trying to, obviously post things to Facebook or Instagram and just pray that we get 100 likes or whatever, right? And that's not how it works.
Yeah.
Because I know even the work that I've submitted to you for this podcast, those things could be better. That's how I'm thinking of it. I'm thinking, well, these are good, but they can be better. I can find things that I could change. I mean, I'm happy to talk about one that I'm looking at right now of my son throwing a baseball. It worked out that I could photograph it in that way. Obviously, fine. The framing is fantastic. I think the moment is good, but the exposure on his face is off. And I would have waited for a time when I could probably do something very similar, but he's turned more towards the sun. Just sort of nitpicking things like that is how you grow. I mean, so you tell yourself, okay, next time you go out, and you don't beat yourself up on things like this, of course.
Right.
You go out and just do better next time. That's all.
Yeah, and you just get better with experience. I remember my first mentor, I second shot a wedding with her, and afterwards she had all of my images, and she was like, "Do you want me to give you a piece of advice?" And I said, "Yes." And she told me that I shoot crooked, that she's like, you need to look for something beyond your subject in your frame to make sure that your horizon is straight, whether it's a wall or whatever it is. And that one little detail stuck with me, in that didn't affect necessarily how I see, but just that technical piece that was needed for one thing. And I think that's so cool. What would you say, speaking of your work that I have looked at here, I was looking through your pictures, and like I was saying a few minutes ago, how you're so well-rounded. I mean, you've got some of your kids here, some of your client work, you've got your beautiful, beautiful wife in the mix, your parents, you've got this one from a football event, flag football.
Yeah.
do you think lights you up the most? Like, when do you find yourself when you're shooting, you've just, the rest of the world is lost to you because you're just completely in the zone? Is there a certain subject, a certain story, or an environment, or an emotion? It's a big question.
It is a big question. I'm going to defer to one of my favorite photographers, David Williams, who several years ago came to Connecticut and did this presentation, where he talked about some of the key ingredients of a photograph, which are light and life. And for me, that combination has always been sort of critical. And I remind myself, is there good light here? If not, what can I do to, obviously bring in good light or find good light? And I look for those moments of life and expression and emotion that are genuine, honestly. And where better than, when you pointed at the flag football photograph, the kids are going to be kids and they're going to be in their element. And so they're doing their thing and I do my thing. And that's where I think I excel, is where I am left to do what I feel like I'm looking for. And the folks who are in front of me are also, not being directed in any way. They're just sort of expressing themselves and being who they are. That lights me up more than anything else. And even the one that is of my son playing a video game. I mean, it's sort of posed, and I'm putting pose in quotes because I didn't ask him to do anything other than what he was doing already. He was just sitting there playing video games. I just happened to be playing with my lighting, and I said, "Hey, let's put this light in front of you and light you up." And he was fine. He just said, "Dad, just do your thing. I'll do my thing," which is playing this, NFL game that he loves to play. So, and I love that. There's no, again, it's an unscripted, just a pure moment, I think, and it's easier almost with kids, I think, than with adults,
so.
Right? Adults tend to sort of draw their walls up the minute you have a camera in their hand. But it all depends on working with clients and making them feel comfortable, understanding what they're looking for. And once, they feel like the photography that I've presented on my website or Instagram or Facebook or wherever is what they're sort of also going for, then it all works out. I mean, I'm looking at my friend, the Masseys, and they let me just sort of photograph them as they are, in the front yard, being able to just do their thing. And this is who they are, just sort of hang out and play. And it's awesome. These are my dream clients in a way, because they know the value of good photography in their homes, and they have this particular photograph that you just opened up, printed nice and large so that they can enjoy it in their home. So, which is a big win, for them, first and foremost for them. So,
heck yeah.
Yeah.
Me, that's what I'm all about, is like pictures that really mean something to people and doing something with them, using them as a means to connect with one another. And it's a means of expression for them, even though you made the picture.
Right.
The act of putting it on their wall.
Yeah.
Saying to the other members of the family, you are important.
100%. 100%.
And speaking of you are important, I was looking at your work, and I usually, when I do these conversations, I'm looking at the work and I'm trying to identify the voice of the photographer. So I am wondering, from what I'm seeing, I was like I said a couple times now, there's a variety of different types of scenes, different stories, different people, different ages, all of that.
Yeah.
What I tend to see though in this is like I do see your thumbprint. Like we were talking before I hit the record button. I see what you were seeing in this, I think, through all of your pictures. What would you say, like if somebody like me were to ask you, like, what is your voice? Do you think that there's a certain emotion or something that you gravitate towards? And I'm asking because when I looked at this, whether it's someone who's individual, like this same photo we were just talking about with your son in the video games, it to me, when I saw this, it reminded me of a picture I made of my daughter when she was watching a movie in my bed. So it's a really similar orientation. She's looking at the screen. She was actually, she's
Right.
littler, so she was sucking her fingers and holding her blankie. But this image triggered that image in my brain, and I was thinking about how I felt about that picture. And it wasn't just that she was cute and watching a movie. It was, I saw her, like, she was important. She was important enough for me to pick up the camera to shoot that moment because I saw her as something important. And even in your pictures that are different, like your parents walking here, I don't
Yeah.
see them walking away. I actually feel, just because of their body language, that they are like this it's not just that they are in this frame. It's like, this is their relationship is important, not just to you, but also to them. So do
Oh,
you
most
see
definitely.
that? Like, do
Most.
you see what I'm saying in some of
Yeah.
these? Can you see
Yeah.
that?
Anywhere that I am looking for connection all the time. I'm looking
Mm-hmm.
for what connects the other person in the frame, or even if it's an individual in the frame and there's no one else in the frame. It's
Mm-hmm.
who that person is and what they, I guess, what they are to me more than anything else. But if it's a if it's a client, for instance, and it's an individual photograph of a client of one of my clients or their kids. Ultimately, I want that photograph to be about um, my client's connection to their child. I mean, that's the goal.
Mm-hmm.
Is that portrait able to connect that person back to that moment in time when that child was that age?
Right.
Um, I don't have a lot of photographs of my own when I was growing up. My father, I have of a few. I mean, a lot more than a lot of other people, I would say, but they're not of me interacting with my parents. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
think that is what I'm going for.
Yeah.
I'm going for that recognition of being loved and being important and being present, uh, that I think was lacking in my life. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and in some way, I'm trying to live through my clients' lives and say, well, let's do this because 20 or 30 years from now, your kids are going to be looking for those photographs where you don't exist in those pictures.
So
Let's
true.
let's correct that.
Mm-hmm.
This is your chance.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no other chance. I mean, this is it. I've got
Mm-hmm.
people. One of the things I'm challenged with right now, and I'm happy to talk about my challenges as well, is that
Yeah.
January through April, right now, this time of the year in New England, nobody wants to go outside. I get
I
it.
don't blame them. It's cold.
It's cold. It's so cold that I can't even hold my camera straight. That's how cold it can get. But that doesn't matter. I mean, you can photograph. In fact, some of the photographs, the one of the two siblings on the couch was photographed, I believe, in the middle of winter. The black and white. Uh, it's possible to do this indoors because ultimately, if the goal is to show connection and love and the relationships that you have with each other, when does not matter.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be all the time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what I'm hoping that I can change in the coming years. That I can convince, persuade the families I work with that don't wait for the summer day when there's blue skies and no clouds and you're out there, on the deck sipping pina coladas. That because that day may or may not come. We're not guaranteed that.
Yeah. Your
We're
life is
guaranteed.
happening.
What's that?
And your life is happening right now.
It's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoy the moment. Be present for your kids right now, and that's what I hope I am when my kids think of me years from now. Let's hope. Let's hope that that's what they're saying about me.
Yeah, I totally agree. What are you doing to document your own family? Meaning, I know you're making the pictures. I see
Yeah.
the pictures. What are you doing with them after you make them?
Um, Selectively printing them for sure.
Hmm.
I mean, we don't have a like a mansion here, so we don't have all that much wall space. But regardless, when there are photographs that really speak uh, to me and to my wife and to my kids. I mean, I'm open to showing these photographs to my children and saying, "Hey, what do you think about this?" You know, I get their input. You know,
Yeah.
because they're in it,
Hmm.
and sometimes it's, "Hey, that's cool," or sometimes it's like, "Oh, please don't post that to Facebook."
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
I've got that going on.
Yeah.
So I completely, get it, and but the ultimate goal isn't to photograph them and hide them in my hard drive, because that would be a complete waste of everyone's time. Um, for me, it's about posting them on my own website, which is going to happen. But mostly, it's about having them at home. And if you come to my home, our living room space is filled with photographs of our kids. Um, sometimes it's of my wife and my kids. There should be some of me and my kids as well, but we'll work on that in the next year or so.
Yeah.
We'll see, but that's the goal. The goal is to have actual tangible things at home that we can actually look up to and
Yeah.
be influenced by every day, be inspired by every day, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, and that happens over time. I mean, you don't have to fill your home with, hundreds and hundreds of pictures. Be selective about it,
I
you know.
love that point. That's so good that it doesn't have to be all done at
Yeah.
one time. That is so
No, not
true.
at all. Yeah.
Evolving thing.
Yeah. I have some clients who are so sharp. They will have a wall picked out. That's their photo wall, I'm like, good for you. Right
Yeah.
on.
Hmm.
I'm so glad you're committed to doing this. That means it's important for them,
Right.
really. That's what it tells me. And now it's all about working with them and trying to figure out exactly what those photographs should look like or feel like for them.
Hmm.
And then being able to produce work that meets their expectations or exceeds their expectations, where
Yeah.
they're
So
blown away, right?
do they swap out their pictures every year, or do they have?
Every couple of years,
Okay.
I wouldn't say it's every year, because
Yeah.
they want to celebrate their kids and themselves for a little while before they see changes. They
Yeah.
go, my 13-year-old, for instance, is starting to, have a little bit of a mushy, and
Yeah.
his voice is getting deeper and things like
Yeah.
that. So I've also recorded their voices, by the way, so because I want to be able to hear them like
Yes.
10 years from now and
Hmm.
think, oh, see, this is what you sounded like,
Hmm.
they
Yeah.
sound so cute,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So, and I have one video of when Rohan, my older son, was, I think, I want to say 6 years old or so, and he had just lost his first tooth or something like that, and he was about to lose his tooth, and he was talking about how wiggly he was, and I have that video, and my wife and I watch it all the time, because he's not like that anymore,
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
that's, I mean, in some respects, photographers, we're sort of documenting change. We're
Yes.
documenting the changes that take place in a family's life, and
Hmm.
it's a gift that goes both ways, honestly. um, I feel so just jazzed by what families will open up their lives to me for and say, hey, this is who we are, you know do your thing. And that's awesome. That's an awesome feeling. And then when I can turn around and present to them photographs that mean something to them, show that they're connected, show that they're important, and then they, displayed in a really prominent place in their home, that says, wow, this is cool.
Hmm.
It's a gift, as they say, that goes both ways. So
Yeah. Do you think that when people inquire with you that they are looking more for that time capsule part, or do you think in a lot of ways they're looking for you to show that love and connection piece? I mean, I think if there was this big umbrella, they're like, I want all of it. But do you find that there's a certain trend in what people are wanting when they inquire?
it's, I would say, mostly about that connection. I
Yeah.
think I think we all live very busy lives, and for us, I think we want, as a parent, I'll tell you, my wife and I have busy lives, but we want something that we can look up to in our homes that says, this is cool, we're good, this is who we are. The kids are, they're good, they're healthy, thank God, and everything is going to be fine. And I think that's what parents are really hoping for, is that it sort of validates their lives in a way that's positive.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, who doesn't want that,
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I found that to be true for me when I first started my documentary journey. I mean, it's been a while since I've taken on clients, but it shifted at first, when I started moving towards this approach, it was about connection and unposed moments. I got that a lot in my inquiries. But then when I connected to myself and I realized that I have this hyper awareness to change, and I started to see just some of the losses in my past and how that affected me in general. And the more I started talking about some of my past experiences, the inquiries started to change to where people were like, this is what's happening in our life. We want to preserve this. And so then it wasn't so much about the connection in the love between the people. It was about, I want to preserve this season of life. So that's why I was
Yeah.
curious what your inquiries looked like.
Right. I think honestly, it sort of serves both purposes. As you say, it's
Yeah.
under a big umbrella where you can do both. It can do both. So I don't sway people like one way or the other. But that said, I will ask them, like, what is it that you see in your child's activities or actions or presence that sort of tickles your heart?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yes.
And I'll find a way to photograph it if it's possible. Because to them, that's what's most important. At that point in time. So if they are if they're saying, hey, listen, we want just a straight portrait of the four of us at our home, like a traditional portrait, I'm willing to do that too. But ultimately it comes down to, do I want to still see that life and light and the connection there as well? I mean, I sometimes, I have clients who do want nothing more than a straight shot of everybody looking back at the camera. Okay, no problem. But I still insist on them just sort of holding on to each other,
Yeah.
and being sort of leaning on each other or whatever,
Yeah.
The mom holding the child in the hand by hand, hugging the child, whatever it is. Ultimately that's what I'm going for. I don't care the form it takes. It does not matter to me.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate goal of what does it say?
So here's another question. What is it like when you bring your camera, when you visit India versus here? What are just some differences that you can tell us about?
Well,
you travel about, like, is it like once a year?
last year I traveled 3 times to India.
Okay.
It was, I think, a record. I've
Yeah.
never been to India 3 times in a year. So it was different. I don't, in India, I don't spend a whole lot of time, really. I spend time with my parents, honestly, at this point in time. I don't have a project in mind where I've started where I do something on the streets or, or work with an NGO or anything like that. I just, it's really about just hanging out and having a lot of good food and, enjoying just, the warm hospitality of my parents and just being at home, so, and, once in a while.
I want you to document and bottle all of that up.
Yeah, I do. I photograph them,
Okay.
because, that photograph you just, showed or talked about, where my mom was leading my dad. That means, you don't see their faces, but you're right. The body language is about, them sort of helping each other up this sort of slightly steep hill up on my front yard, so they don't fall, they don't, go off balance. My father has Parkinson's, so it's at a point where he's not able to walk. Even this photograph right here, things have changed so much. since this time. This is, at least he's walking without a walker. Now he's got a walker,
Yeah.
and he's got somebody holding him from the back so he doesn't topple over. Even though he has had a couple of falls. And so there's a lot, that photograph means to me, in terms of, we talk about intent a lot, uh, that photograph is sort of it's a tough photograph for me to look at, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's a photograph that says just so much about who they are for each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes well beyond the simple act of walking up a hill. It's about support. It's about loyalty. It's about so many things. So, the stories are endless. And ultimately, I want that to be their legacy. That the fact that they were super loyal to each other, super supportive of each other's very crazy dreams. Mostly my dad's dreams, to be honest with you. So, it's the way it is. Even now, even when I call them, it's the discussions are always surrounding what he's been doing and that kind of thing. So it's interesting. I mean, the photograph of him on stage, that was at Lincoln Center, where he gave a short speech about the hospital that he built. And interestingly, he just turned around and saluted the entire orchestra behind him. And one individual who plays the cello there just turned around and responded in kind. And that was you can't plan those kinds of things.
Exactly.
You just sort of, you got to be there and sort of enjoy the moment. And I love the smiles behind everybody smiling. As I said, I don't think that was not planned. It was just sort of an unscripted moment. So.
Right. Yeah. And it's a big moment. And I think that it speaks to who he is as a man.
Yeah.
Through everybody that's in there. And then plus the whole story surrounding what was going on, why that picture happened.
Yeah.
Sure. There was a picture that, while we're on the topic of your family, I actually pulled this up in Instagram because I was stalking your Instagram since I didn't get your Dropbox stuff earlier.
I'm so sorry.
I'm just teasing. But I was on your Instagram and this picture jumped out at me. I was like, oh, I love this. I want to see more of this. Was this in India?
No, this was here in New York, actually.
Okay.
That's my aunt on the right, and obviously it's my dad on the left. That's an interesting dynamic in our relationship because my father lost his mom when he was 11 years old. And so this lady on the right was his mom.
Wow.
For a number of years until my father, obviously moved on and went to medical school and things like that. But he has just a tremendous amount of love and respect for this lady. And she, has her own medical conditions going on. So that this is a tough, again, another tough photograph to make. But it sort of connects the two of them, It's sort of, there's a invisible circle in a way, in my head at least, of the two of them just being connected by this card game, which I think my dad was just like, I don't think he was really clued in on what she was doing, but he was just curious and wanted to be present for her and be there for her. And
is she playing solitaire?
She may be. She may have been.
Like
yeah. It's my aunt who's suffering from dementia now, and so I don't. At some point, I think she didn't even know who it was that was sitting in front of her. So she didn't know who I was. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's tough.
And it's somebody who I'd grown up knowing, so it was kind of very hard. So, but that's an interesting thing, interesting frame as well. Shot with an iPhone, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So.
Yeah. When I looked at this picture, and this is why one of the many reasons I wanted to create this podcast is, I was talking to you earlier about the picture and your son in the video game and how that triggered a memory of mine, of another picture that I have. And then when I saw this before our conversation, I looked at this and it triggered a story of my dad's parents, and so my grandparents, and one of my grandpa's sisters. They used to always play cards. They played a game called Hands and Feet, and I'd go over there many a time, and all the old folks were around the table playing cards, and all of us kids were doing our own thing. And that memory was sparked looking at this. And that's what I just think is so beautiful about what we're doing is if this is important to you, there's a whole story there. But even though I don't know these people, it still stirs something up within me.
Isn't that interesting that sometimes these photographs are, universal?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And I love that about photography, that you may, take a photograph of two complete strangers that are just hanging out.
Mm-hmm.
And that might trigger an emotion in somebody else, and that way we're all connected, in my mind at least.
Exactly. Yeah. So then the last picture that I want to talk about, I've got to get back to the main Dropbox folder here. I want to talk about your iconic photo that you submitted, which I believe
absolutely, yeah.
Your wife and your kids.
Yes.
Let me find that Dropbox link and pull it up so we can look at it. But can you tell everybody about that picture?
It's an extremely untechnical photograph. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, out of focus, but it's not like so out of focus that you don't know what's going on.
Right. It was photographed on their first day of school, where it's for my wife, it's an emotional day. She takes the day off. Every year she takes the day off.
I think you told me that when I met in Connecticut. I think I remember you saying that. That's so cute.
Yeah, she takes the day off and she hangs out and makes sure that they've got everything in their bags, they're dressed properly. And this photograph to me means a lot because even though you don't see their faces really well, I know who they are. It's full of love, full of joy. It's who they are for me more than anything else.
Yeah. I see your wife's whole energy in giving hugs and kisses out in this. Like that jumps out at me so clearly.
Yes.
They're almost kind of calm, but you can see her energy is like a mom. Like we know like how I am. Like when my little Levi just got his haircut a couple weeks ago. He had long past his ears hair and just shaved it all off for the most part. And I was just couldn't get enough of just touching and hugging and kissing and all of that. And that's what I feel when I look at that myself.
Absolutely. We are a very huggy family, no doubt about it. We don't hold back.
Yeah. And, well, it speaks to that she takes that first day of school off. Like to me, that just bottles her right up from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of love in that photograph. As I said, it's technically so poor. It's one of those times when I wasn't ready for it, and it is what it is. But I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
It just sort of it tells a story for me. It's the story of my family, at least the story about my wife's relationship with our kids, and that means just the world to me. So.
Yeah, I agree. That's awesome. All right. Now I'm going to ask you just a couple more questions and then I will let you off the hook for soon. But tell us about Tiffin Box. When did that start? I know what it is, but tell our listeners what Tiffin Box is so we can send some people your way too.
Oh, lovely. So Tiffin Box is a blog that I started right around the time when I was in my graduate school. I was sort of looking for resources online where, I was hoping to get inspired by other photographers, and I would find bits and pieces, here and there. I wasn't really thrilled about how they were presented. And then I said to myself, why don't I curate these links? It was really a sort of a place for me. Very selfishly, it was a place for me to just go back to and click on links that I really loved going back to and seeing. This was before I even realized there's such a thing as an RSS reader. So I created this website, blog to just keep in touch with other photographers. And, it's been going on since 2003. And I enjoy doing it. It is not my primary focus. Obviously, my business is. So sometimes things sort of really, sometimes things go quiet on the site, which is unfortunate. I wish I had a few other writers and guest bloggers to come in and say, hey, we'll continue working and publishing things. So it's one of those things where it's a project that could go in different directions, but right now it's all about connecting other photographers to resources that they'll find useful to elevate their craft or their commerce. And I say it's to sustain a business, essentially, to make a life out of being a photographer. A lot of people struggle with it, and I'm no exception. I find my struggles with it as well. And in my finding resources, I'm helping myself, and I'm able to help other photographers. So that way, hopefully it lifts both of us up, and we can produce better work.
Yeah, I really like heading to the site because it feels like you've got a really wide variety of different topics and things that sometimes when you're looking for information, you're looking for a certain piece of information, but sometimes you don't know what you don't know. I mean, I guess you always don't know what you don't know. And so I like going to Tiffin Boxes. It's not like Fearless and Framed. It's all, for the most part, mostly documentary work.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's all you're going to find. But with what you've created, it's like you speak to so many different, you're the most well-connected photographer I know. So many people. So I love it because I never know exactly what I'm going to find there. And that's really fun. So
thank you.
You've got to check it out.
Right.
Who are, say, 2 or 3 photographers who are really inspiring you right now?
Oh boy, I just got done meeting Sam Abel, and so if I don't mention him, that would be a real shame. He is phenomenal. I want everybody to go Google his name, Sam Abel, Abell, and what a great guy. He came to speak at a convention that I coordinated here with a group called CTPPA, and he's been, with the National Geographic for 33 years. His aesthetic, his approach, his philosophy, everything was just so on point with everything that I do. I love the fact that he's from Ohio originally, and his aesthetic is all about slowing down. Essentially, his thing is don't rush into a scene to take pictures and sort of hope for the best. Wait for the moment; it'll happen.
I love that.
So a lot of what he's taught me is about patience. You asked me early on in this conversation, what was so important about going to graduate school and photojournalism. One of the things I learned was patience, honestly. It's about going back. If you're not finding the photograph once, you got to go back again to find that photograph that will make the story. You got to go back again and again and again, And, one of the places that I studied at was the Salt Center for Documentary Studies. Todd Hoffman, who I still revere to this day, chastised me once because I came back and I said, I couldn't find that place and he looked at me and said, have you gone far enough? And I was like, what? No, I hadn't gone far enough. That was the freaking clue right there, The next time I sure enough found the place and was not, it was I don't know, another 200 yards or so, I felt so silly. I came back to him and I said, Todd, I'm so sorry, but I did find the place.
Yeah.
Because, that's the key, It's we don't push ourselves. And, photography these days, and I sound like an old man when I say these days, but, when I started, there was no Instagram and there was no real Facebook. So there was no rush to push that photograph, whatever it was, up to the websites, up to the internet to share to the whole world. There was time to finesse that moment. And I think that's what I feel is something we're starting to lose, that idea to be able to finesse that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And by finessing that moment, I don't mean manufacturing that moment. I mean waiting for that moment to be even better, you know. And I think we're such a hurried species now that
Yeah.
we're just like, let's go put it up on a website so we can get 30 likes and feel good about ourselves and get a quick dopamine kick,
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that is unfortunate. That's the part I wish would change. And there are times when I don't post anything to Instagram or Facebook, but I'm making photographs.
Yeah.
And that comes from that discipline I talked about before. Is that some of these are not ready for prime time yet,
Yeah.
and realizing that, understanding that, is a critical part of one's journey as a photographer. I think,
Mm-hmm.
and you talk about being intentional. Being intentional is, I think, supremely important in this field, because otherwise you're just a snapshot.
Yeah.
You're just making snapshots. You know,
Yeah.
which
I think,
has its own value, no doubt. But at some point, if you're trying to elevate your work to a level of artwork for your clients or for yourself,
right.
you've got to be a little bit more patient and a little bit more intentional about what you're producing. Otherwise, it ain't going to stand the test of time.
That's
It'll
so
be quick.
true.
It'll be quickly forgotten. Which is
Mm-hmm.
what I'm afraid of mostly. It's like someone says, "Hey, what are you afraid of?" Seshu, I'm afraid of mediocrity
Mm.
more than anything else.
Yeah.
You
Why
know,
is that? Why do you think?
oh boy.
I know that's a tough one. I ask because I actually just recorded something about being content versus being stagnant.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes if you're not growing, you're stagnant, but at the same time, sometimes you can just be content with where you're at. And so I'm just curious on your perspective.
So it's hard to talk about this without getting emotional. I'll be honest with you, because this involves my father and my mom as well. And growing up, even though they were both physicians, they looked at me straight in the face and said, "Seshu, you can do whatever you feel like doing in the future. Just be good at it
Mm-hmm.
and make sure that it helps people."
Oh, I like that.
And that is a short little lesson from how my parents think about even themselves. They're very good at what they do, and they're out there helping people. They're not in it for the money.
Mm-hmm.
They're doctors, but they're not rich by any measure. They're definitely it's a conversation for another time. But they're out there doing things for the community, and that's what I hope I can do as well through my photography. That's a larger goal. So it's not enough for me to be just you know producing good photographs today. I want to be able to produce good photographs tomorrow. So the learning never stops for me. I'm constantly pushing myself in terms of technique, in terms of technology, in terms of whatever.
Thank you for
Because
sharing that.
yeah,
I have like so many light bulbs going off, because it's one thing, for as long as I've known you, I've always seen you just immersed in learning and growth, and just seeing how you've contributed back to the community, not just with your literal photos, but just your presence in the community.
absolutely. I think we each can find our own way of giving back.
Mm-hmm.
And I know if there's any, I mean, my parents know what I do now, obviously, and enjoy the photographs of their grandkids when I send it to them and all that good stuff. But I mean, to a certain extent, I want them to be proud of my work, of course. And if that has to happen, I have to continue with what their directive was: be good at what you do and make sure it helps people. If I stray away from that, then I've failed.
Mm-hmm.
Until if I constantly do that, then I know I'm still on that journey. I'm chasing that. I'm okay with that. So that's what sort of drives me more than anything else. Is that directive. Be able to do something good, whatever you feel like doing. Because culturally, if you go to India, growing up, this was a constant question for me at least, was that oh, your parents are doctors. Wow, what kind of a doctor are you going to become? This is like a constant. I mean, every reception or you know gathering that as kids we would go to, my brother and I would go to, we'd be asked this question, and I think my parents saw the sort of like confused look at our faces, at least my face. My brother did well. He's a PhD in cellular biology, so he's closer to being a medical doctor than I am. But that look at my face probably at some point suggested that they come and talk to me, and they said, "I know that there's this pressure to be a doctor, but be a physician, but you don't have to be a physician. You can be just pick something that you're going to be really good at and help people with it."
What
That's
amazing parents you have to just
I do, no doubt.
push you into what lights you up. That's
Yes.
awesome.
Yeah, very rare, super rare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, on that note, I think we're going to wrap this up. Can you
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. My pleasure. Can you tell
great.
everyone your links of where they can find you for our listeners?
Sure. SeshuPhotography.com. And I also have a separate website for headshots. So it's ConnecticutHeadshots.com. And of course, Tiffin Box we talked about, which is tiffinbox.org.
All right. And for those of you listening, if you go to fearlessandframed.com, you'll definitely want to download the mini mag that goes with this. And it has in the show notes and also in the mini mag has the actual links to all of his links so you can follow Seshu. And thank you again, Seshu, for doing this.
Oh, this was great. Thank you so much for getting me out there and speaking with you. That was great.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you to our podcast team for making the Intentional Documentary podcast possible. Our sound editor, Lucy Burgess, Minimag designer, Jillian Adriana, and our show notes manager, Ebony Rivera. Special thank you to our episode guests for openly sharing their insight. And thank you for listening, of course. Please hit the review tab to leave a rating. I'd love to read about your favorite episodes and what has really clicked for you. And remember, the only way to approach your photography is through your lens, your way. Photograph freely, and I'll see you next time. Visit fearlessandframed.com/intentional documentary podcast for this episode and all past episodes, show notes, and mini mags.